So I thank God that I live in a country that ultimately had the stomach, had the intestinal fortitude to see that through. You know, and people can say what they want about George W. Bush, and some people disagree, and all across the board. But I'll tell you what, he made a tough decision to surge. Maybe 10% of the country stood behind him when he said that. I don't know what it was, but it was highly unpopular. It was also the right thing to do.
Yes.
It was the right thing to do, and I said so. You know, that book that was mentioned, I mean, I was just finishing it when that decision was being made, and I supported it in the book. I supported it in the book because I thought it was the right thing to do. Some people had looked at early drafts and said, you don't really need to go there. You know, you're looking at processes, but you know what? It was the logical conclusion of a processes that was more functional. When you started to look at the replacement of Donald Rumsfeld with Mr. Gates, you know, that allowed for the advice to flow up to the decision makers, and the decision maker realizing in concert with the Congress that we had to make these additional resources to bring to bear so that we could win that situation. So, you know, I'll tell you that there's never a day that goes by that I don't think about those that we lost over there. And I have this to help me. I rub this every day, right here. And, you know, those Americans that we lost, they're never coming back. They're never coming back. There's a big gaping hole in the families that lost their loved ones. And all we can do right now is we need to honor that sacrifice. We need to live up to our God-given potential. That's I believe, our mission here in life, is to live up to our God-given potential, to give everything we have to be the best person, to be the best husband, the best father, the best citizen. That's what our job is in life. That's what I think our calling is to do. And so I wanted you to know a little bit about that, about my background, before I talk about, you know, our country and talk about where I think we need to go. You know, I mentioned it at the outset, but in my study of history, you think about our country and you think about the founding and how truly inspired it was. And you think about 1775 and 1776, and you think about what it was like to live then. If you ever want to read an account, you read John Adams by McCullough, because I think he really does it justice. He actually tries to describe what it was like to live here, you know, in those times as people were making decisions. Remember, 1/3 of our country did not sign on. 1/3 of our country did not want to rebel. And 1/3 were very hard to rebel, and about a third were on the fence and could go either way. But you think about the inspiration of the Declaration of Independence. And you think about the fact that the simplicity of that document, right? In an age where we have bills sometimes in excess of 2,000 pages, this was one page. This was one page. And it changed the history of the world. One page changed the history of the world. You think about the simplicity, the beauty, the clarity. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men are created equal. You know, endowed by a Creator with certain unalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. You know, we look at it now and we say, of course, back then that was radical. That was a radical idea. This was in a period where we had divine right of kings and queens, and we were subjects, and that was our government. And we wrote one single page. We said, no, we're free. We're free from that. And then that's the first third of the Declaration. And then the bottom 2/3, quite frankly, is like a divorce document. It is. I mean, it basically says, look, you know, the decent respect for the opinions of mankind, you know, demand that we say why. So we list them. Why that's important is you take a look, if you ever have time, this is worthwhile to do. Take a look at the bottom 2/3 of the Declaration, and then look at the Bill of Rights. Because you see the crosswalk there. We're all products of our experience. I'm no different. I'm sure you're not either. And neither were the founders. That's why the Bill of Rights is there. Why do we have the First Amendment? Because King George stepped all over it.
That's right.
He wouldn't let us, he told us when we could speak, where we could assemble, you know, and what, he could step on our religion, and he was stepping all over our freedom. We got the First Amendment. What about the Second Amendment? Why is the Second Amendment? Because some people look at 2007, well, how'd that get there? I'll tell you how it got there. Because the Brits were going to conquer. You know when Paul Revere was saying the Brits were coming?
Yeah.
They were going to get the guns.
That's right.
That's where, and you say, well, that's the Brits. That was our government. We look at it now and say, that was great. That was our government. That was like the federal government then to us. That was our government. They were marching to get our guns. We put the Second Amendment there. We said you can't do that. We got the right to keep and bear arms. And you can't take that away. That's something we stand for. That's right. That's right. Okay, I won't go through all 10, but you get the point. You know, and what the last thing I want to tell you about the Constitution is that if you had to sum it up, and you wouldn't want to, but if you had to, and it's probably worthwhile for the sake of time tonight, I mean, the animating principle in the Constitution is the idea that we could live free, and to do that, we're going to limit the government. I mentioned that governments are instituted among men to secure life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. But like Madison, you know, you look at the Federalist Papers, it says, then you got to figure out how to stop the government from stepping on us. Well, they did that. That was the genius in the document.
Sure.
You know, I mean, they had read history. These leaders had read Locke, Rousseau, Montesquieu. They had, you know, read Addison's Cato. They had read all these works, these classics. And the search for the virtuous leader, although we never stopped, they knew that you're going to end up broken-hearted eventually, and so you needed to put virtue in the system. And that's why we used ambition to counteract ambition. That's why it's in our Constitution. That's why you've got a Congress with a House and a Senate. And you've got a Congress that's checked by a president and the courts. And you've got a president that's checked by the Congress and the courts. And you've got a courts that are checked by the Congress and the president. That's the federal government. And then checking the federal government is the states. Co-equal sovereignty initially, right? You know, that's why it was there. We did that to counteract. So we would not have, and by the way, all behind that is an armed populace, just to be sure. You know, I mean, another check. It was another check, right? I mean, and then it's written in that you look at the 9th and the 10th Amendment. You know, anything not enumerated here is left to the states or to the people. I mean, that's why. We set this government up so that we could live free. You know, and I will tell you that we were mocked. We were mocked. Nobody believed it would work. In fact, you know, Great Britain, the greatest superpower in the world at the time, they mocked us. And, you know, they made songs like Yankee Doodle Dandy. You've heard of that? That was a mocking of us. And, you know, you look at some historians' account of Yorktown, and you'll see that, and there's some debate on all this, but I'll tell you, the world turned upside down. Anybody learn that in school? That they played that? The Brits played that at the surrender at Yorktown? Well, one version of this is they were mocking us, right? Because of the fact that they didn't believe we could live free. They were so tired of the war after 7 years, they said, let's go home. They'll beg us to come back. This can't work. We got no king. A bunch of rabble. It won't work out. You know, and then somehow this country's working out. By 1819, you know, the heads of state are like, how's that working out? What is it? We need to get a smart guy. Go get that de Tocqueville and send him over there to figure out, tell him to come back and tell us when they're going to ask him to come back. Well, de Tocqueville came over here, and he went native.
Right.
He came over here, and he loved this land. Spent a little over a year here. He traveled all about, and he was enamored with the fact of the way this country was set up, freedom, that the fact that families took care of their own, the fact that communities took... We had voluntary organizations. Now, that was something in Europe you really didn't see much of. You know, you had strong church and state, but you didn't have these voluntary. So this is the thing, that de Tocqueville went back to the heads of state. He said, first thing I'm going to tell you is it's going to work out. The second thing is that this country is going to go on to be the greatest country in the world. We went on to fulfill that destiny. We went on to fulfill that destiny, and I maintain it's because of the genius in that document. It's because, even though our system is far from perfect, it's the best when you compare it with any others, because it's most closely aligned with human nature. That's why. And so, when you look at our situation today, in 2010, I hope you can appreciate why I see it the way I do. I'm sorry I took longer than perhaps that you wanted to hear on that, but here's why. I want you to understand that when I look at this, when you hear my platform, it's because I don't believe the answers to our problem are going to be found in Washington, D.C. We set up a government so that we would limit that power. And that's right.